Welcome to ADF Property, the podcast where we talk about all things property investing and real estate for Australian Defence Force personnel. Whether you're looking to build and scale a property portfolio or relocating across Australia, we've got the insights and tips for less stress and more success. Let's dive in.
Well, good day everyone, it's Liam Garman here, Managing Editor of Real Estate at Momentum Media, the team that brings you the Defence Property Podcast with my co-host, Kane, Dury, Director and Lead Buyers Agent at Discover Buyers Agency. Mate, how are you going? This is our first time in the podcast together because we've been doing it remotely.
Yeah, last one was dial-in, but all the others have been in the studio, but first one together.
Yeah.
And last one for the year.
I know, it's almost sad.
Yeah, almost.
Wrapping it up, and I know it's been a pretty jam-packed year in the world of property and no shortage of things to recap. And we've got a very special guest on today, Morgan Oliver, Director and Sales Agent of JMO Property Group. Welcome to the podcast, Morgan.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
And you're dialing in remotely. Where are you joining us from?
Gold Coast.
The GC. Aren't you from the GC as well, Kane?
Yeah, we're actually neighbours or, in neighbouring suburbs, Morgan and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should have packed him in your briefcase when you came down today.
Yeah. I don't know. I was up at, I think, 2:30 this morning to get to the airport to get here. So I don't know if he was keen for that.
Why do you do that to yourself?
I don't know. I've got a bit of a packed couple of days here in Sydney. So, yeah. And I do love Sydney. A bit of a soft spot for it, I guess.
Visiting clients, speaking to
clients and a couple of sort of military contacts and that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So where were you posted around Australia?
Myself, grew up in South Australia. Went to Latchford Barracks in Victoria. There was trade training. Then Townsville for 5 years. Sydney for 3 out at Holsworthy there. And then back to Townsville and finished in Perth.
Yeah, wow.
So moved around a bit.
Yeah, that's a lot of posting.
Yeah, it helps a lot on the buying side as well. Since we buying, if we're buying in Perth or Victoria, because a lot of the areas you've been to and you have that good knowledge of, not just knowledge from a map and online.
Now, I do want to give a quick plug to our last podcast, which was the 10 top tips, too many T's, 10 top tips for people in the ADF looking to buy because, and I'm sure our guest is very familiar with this as well, in terms of different professions and their levels of investment property ownership, ADF is right up there because, as you both know, you posted to Townsville for a few years, you buy a house, and then you posted somewhere else, and then suddenly you're left with a house that becomes an investment property. And the need to understand that, even understanding the finances, where you move from there. Morgan, you were in the Navy. Talk to us a little bit about your defence history, where you enlisted, a snapshot of what you did throughout your career and what led you to property investing.
Yeah, definitely. So prior to the ADF, I was doing like a building cadetship through a construction company that's based here on the Gold Coast. Knew that I loved property, but hated being in the building industry. So I joined the Navy in 2010. I originally signed up on surface fleet as a combat systems operator because I couldn't go direct entry as a submariner, which now, after being through it, learned that it's sort of more of a life from recruiting just to get numbers or bums on seats. As soon as I got into basic training, the submarine recruiters came around and said, look, if you want to swap over now, and I did. And from there, I went from Melbourne, which is HPAS Cerberus, finishing basic training, off to Sydney for 6 months, and then Western Australia for the rest of my time in the military. And I deployed on 3 of the 6 submarines, went multiple locations around Southeast Asia, war games over in Hawaii, and then came back here 2015. Unfortunately, got severely injured, and then 3rd of August 2016, I medically discharged from the military.
And that's hugely challenging, but I think a story that a lot of people listening to this podcast would be quite familiar with in defence. How do you two know each other?
Yeah, so obviously Morgan's a sales agent, like in the neighbouring suburb to me, and I'm a buyer's agent. So, there's lots of sales agents in every area, I guess, but a common connection sort of mentioned to me that Morgan was ex-defence, and we caught up for a coffee and have just sort of mates and kept in touch since, So, but yeah, Morgan, tell us about your deployment in the subs. Keen to hear that, and I think the audience would like that.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously when an Australian submarine leaves port, it is under secrecy. So, most of the crews got a secret clearance. My department was electronic warfare. or they've changed that now to called cryptologic systems. So we specialize in the electromagnetic spectrum, basically listening to radar, aircraft noise, missile seeker heads and stuff like that, so we can detect and find out what's out there. So when we come to what's called periscope depth, we're still 17 meters underwater, we throw the periscopes up, we throw up the whip antennas, we can quickly detect if there's things out there that can see us, or if they can detect us, and then we can give the captain and the ops room a quick snapshot of what's out there and whether we should dive deep again.
Now, how did you turn that into the world of property investing? So you bought your first property, an owner-occupier. It's since doubled in value in 2017. That was a year after you discharged. Talk to us about that. What were your considerations in getting into the world of property investing?
Yeah, so my partner at that time was in real estate. We always had an eye to get into it, but being, we were young officers of the military, we considered buying property in Perth. Then I got injured, and the Navy at that point in time had a policy of returning you back to your home port. So they returned me back to the Gold Coast. Coming back here, we again bought that property in 2017. We purchased that for 511. Now in the current market, it's probably around the 115 to resale. But from that point, we just then started leveraging the equity. Every year the equity went up. We leveraged that. I also made a decision to not sort of fall into that rut that most defense people do when they get paid out from defense, to just go blow it on cars or, piss it up against the wall. I took that money and went and bought investment properties.
No jet ski.
Yeah, no jet skis.
Yeah.
There's a bit of
no jet skis, no utes.
Theme, the jet skis and the Maloo ute.
Yep.
Do you say that a lot in your as a buyer's agent when people come to you that they've got these things on the books that you're like, oh, don't think that's the wisest choice?
Yeah, I would say it's probably not even because obviously I was a mortgage broker prior to buyer's agent, and it's certainly not isolated to the defence community. There's many people out there that I guess have got plenty of toys, but it's the choices that we make, I guess, that allow us to build that portfolio.
No, totally. Now, what did you do from there? So you mentioned that you took the equity out of that property. You've purchased your first investment property in 2017, a unit in Southport, 180K cash with your DVA payout. Talk to us through that.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So it was one bedroom unit, fully self-contained, had all furniture in it. At that point in time, it was tenanted at $330 a week, I think it was, right on the Marine Parade in Southport. So it's right at the end of Smith Street if anyone's on the Gold Coast. So we purchased that. There's an old gentleman in there that was renting the property. We waited for him to vacate. We went in there, repainted, recarpeted, all new furniture, appliances, and then tenanted that at, I think it was like $580 a week. So within the first couple of months, already improved the value of the property, and two, the positive cash flow for ourselves. So we started banking that. We had it revalued. They valued that at $300,000. We then took that money as clean, equitable money out of that property and moved it on to the next one. And then that's when we bought the Gatton property and sort of kept rinsing and recycling this cash out of the properties.
So on that one, you said it was fully furnished. So correct. Was that a standard sort of 6-12 month lease, or was it a short term?
No, 12-month lease. We preference a 12-month lease.
Yep.
We just didn't want the fast turnover.
Yeah, sure.
Now I'm interested to get a little bit of insight. So you went into the property, you did some maintenance, you did some upkeep. Talk to us through that. What kind of prices did you put into this? What kind of benefits did it yield for you?
Oh, we probably put 10 grand max into this property. The $10,000 was paint, carpets, and furniture. Really, it was probably less than that at this now, looking back. We then had a depreciation specialist go through, and as I guess those items are depreciating, the assets appreciating. But that turned us from that $330 a week in rents. Essentially within 2 weeks, we're at $580, I think it was, or $550, $580. So straight away, it's a significant jump in income on that. So
sorry, that was $280 a week to over $500 a week in rent. Over
380 to over 500, yeah.
300. That's a massive jump. Now, one thing I do want to ask a question on, because a lot of people that are listening to this podcast might be new to the world of investment properties. They might be new to their investment journey. They might be people in defense that have just moved away and now unknowingly have kind of acquired an investment property without intending to. You use the term depreciation. Can you talk us through how that works?
Yeah, so basically you have a specialist goes through the house. They go and look at all your depreciating assets. So white goods, blinds, fans, anything you've done to it. They do a depreciation schedule so you can write that off over a certain amount of years. And that, as that is a taxable write-off, the property is appreciating in value and going up, but then you can renew those. So if you have a long-term hold on it, you keep redoing it sort of every 7 years, you're depreciating assets, so you can keep writing tax off on that property.
And it seems like an important thing for people to know.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to bring up with the accountant. The accountant's going to guide you on the nitty-gritty and the policy on depreciation. So, but a quantity surveyor and a depreciation report is what you're looking for.
And one of the things we're looking for in all our properties is the ability to sort of refresh it, renovate it, and put that rental yield a lot higher. So when I'm looking for a property, I know typically an investor that I see investors are looking for a 5% rental yield. I'm looking straight away off the bat. It has to be 7% or higher before I'll even look at it or touch it. So I'm churning through, hundreds of properties at a time, just trawling the market looking for those. And once I find that right one, it's then, well, look at the rental yields around and what can I do to that property to turn that rental yield even higher straight away, so that I can go get it revalued, do my depreciation, and then take that cash-free money out of the property and buy another one.
So on that, you've got a pretty strong background here. I've got some investment stats from you. 102 settlements year to date. You know the market pretty well.
Yep.
So rentals. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I guess with going on to that rental side of things, we use that Marine Parade property in Southport. We purchased 76 Old College Road. That was just an 800 square metre block in regional Gatton. So it's about 20 to 30 minutes out of Toowoomba here in Queensland, southeast region. We then refreshed that one. We got a very, very light development approval on there to put 4 townhouses, and then sold that on again. So that was an acquisition of 270, I believe, and we sold that the start of this year at 485, and that's what then we took that money to then go acquire this large rent roll. So we purchased out one of our biggest competitors, which was Ray White Ormo, and we purchased them, shut their doors, took the rent roll, and grew our business.
Whoa.
Stop it.
That's massive.
Just jumping back on Gatton there. Any reason you chose not to develop it once the DA was in place, opposed to selling it?
Yeah, look, we planned. We had construction drawings drawn up for it. We always planned, but obviously having assets that you can liquidate pretty fast to make business acquisitions, it was a smarter choice to liquidate that, off-sell it. At that point in time, we're sort of still going through the peak of the buying market at the start of this year. We found there was more homeowners looking for it than developers, and it made more sense. Like the highest developments offer we got on it was 400,000, and a homeowner bought it for 485.
Yep.
And then they value the house. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Yep. Nice. And then I believe there was a purchase. Was this after the house in Jacobs Well?
That was, I can bring up the date, sorry. That was in 21. So we purchased the house in 21 for 660,000. That was it's a dual income property. So it's a 4-bedroom house at the front, 800 square metre block in Jacobs Well. For this property, it was more a strategic hold. So Jacobs Well is the last place on the Gold Coast that's still on septic and tank water for a suburban township. And then if you look between Byron Bay and the Sunshine Coast, there's nothing like it. There's nothing that's still on tank water or septic that sits in there that is somewhat a holiday spot, easy to access, Moreton Bay, launch jet skis, that sort of thing. Once the Gold Coast City Council rolls the town water and sewage through, then the prices in there are going to go through the roof. We'll sort of see what, I guess, Miami here on the Gold Coast did, and land values will triple.
Got a pretty sick Irish tavern out there as well.
There is, yep. Yeah. You look at Calypso Bay. I mean, you look at the land there. People are buying a 400 square metre block for $1 million at the moment. So, and then building a $1 million build on it and selling them for 2.5.
Pretty much launch your boat in your 5 minutes to Tipplers and Jumping Bar.
Correct. Yep. So it's more of a location. One of those things they say, location. This also was a strategic hold for us too, because all of our other properties are positively geared, so they're generating cash flow. With the business too, we needed a negative offset. So this is our negative offset for my personal income, so that we can have a tax loss on it.
Yeah. With a granny flat and a house paid 660, it wouldn't be too negative though, would it?
No, yes, no, it is now. But once we re-lended, we took the money out of it. So we did a very light cleanup, took the money out of it and moved on to the next property.
Yeah. Cool.
So that is now, we purposely made that one a negative geared property purely for tax offset.
Cool. So we've purchased Ormo, we've purchased Southport, we've purchased Jacob as well, we've purchased Gatton, sold Gatton, and then I believe selling Southport unit was next.
Yeah, we sold Southport. Again, that was just for cash flow for moving into the Mackay property, which is the last one we purchased this year. I had a mate that was looking. He said, "Look, we can't find anything. We want something that we can come to the Gold Coast and sort of holiday in between tenants." I said, "Perfect. I'm going to sell if you want to buy it. My price is 300," and he paid it. So we now manage that for him. So the property hasn't gone far. It's now one of the properties we manage in the rent roll.
Yeah, nice.
Now, you've got quite a good journey here. So then you use that to buy your unit block in Mackay for $860. You renoed one of the units, and now it's now been revalued to 1.24. Is that what Mackay Central Queensland?
Yeah, Mackay Central Queensland. Yep.
So I mean, this is. I'm looking through this. I find it quite interesting. A lot of investors, rightly or wrongly, think that they should be herding to the major cities, but there are quite good capital gains to be made in regional and rural areas as well. What kind of rent yields are you looking at for the properties in Mackay?
Yeah, so they're all 3-bedroom units up there. The front two are tenanted at just under 500 a week, and the rear unit originally was 400, and now we've just re-let it at 630 a week. So what I find with regional areas is they're not as fast paced as what we find with agents here on the Gold Coast. They don't do as much due diligence on their properties before they take them to market, and it's not hard to find those, I guess, those diamonds among the rough. And with this property up there, it was a good opportunity to find the next development property, which we did. So it's a 1,012 square meter block in the heart of the CBD of Mackay. Right next door, you've got a church. So straight away, you can go for like higher education, childcare, things like that. The prerequisites are already set. What the agent didn't do is look into its height limits. So on the outskirts of Mackay CBD, you've got a 17 meter or 5-story height limits. And that's what that block, and a 1,000 square meter block in the CBD that you can go 5 stories. We'll eventually get a DA on that. But the aspect of this property was get it purchased. We went through unit 3, repainted, refloored, new lights, bathroom. Again, to start that depreciation schedule, and then had it revalued. So we acquire using low doc loans, which was Bluestone at that stage. And as of yesterday, it's being now refinanced to Macquarie. And that's when they do their valuation on the property. So they took it from that 860 acquisition price and revalued it at 1.24, which gave us a cash out of just under 300,000. So then that 300,000 is now sitting in our offset account or in a high interest account to go purchase the next property when we find it.
Those numbers are really quite astounding to me, living in Sydney and being more familiar with the Sydney market, because I live in North Sydney, and you've got units here that the unit itself is around $1 million, but then the per week rent is only $700. You're almost getting 2.5 times that rent for your places in Mackay. That yield is quite high.
So
and that's where we're looking at that positive
total. Yeah.
What was that? Sorry,
1630 per week total for the 3.
Correct.
Yep. And then you'll renovate unit 1 and 2 in between tenancies. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And then that's going to bump those up to that 630, 650 mark as well.
Correct.
Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. The regional yields are much stronger than the Sydney yields, which I guess why the rent vesting strategy that, I guess, or at least some of the audience would be familiar with, was probably born in Sydney based on the yields here, that it's so expensive to buy a home and live in. So people are choosing to continue renting here and then go chasing stronger yields in those regional markets, which is essentially, Morgan owns his home in the Gold Coast, but still buying those regions for stronger yields.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that yield seems to be 2.5 times bigger than some of the ones you get in Sydney. Not that I'm saying you would necessarily invest in Sydney as your first go-to, but the differences are quite stark. So, Morgan, you mentioned earlier that a lot of investors wouldn't look to invest with a yield less than 5%. Your benchmark personally is you would not invest with less than a 7% yield. What are some of the major check boxes that you would look for in an area that would guarantee that 7% yield?
Yeah, so I'm looking for what industry is coming there, having a look at its economical outlook for the next 5-10 years, seeing if the Queensland government's got anything planned in the area. So, for instance, Gatton, they're building a huge medium density prison or medium security prison at its Gatton, and there's a new high-speed rail going from Toowoomba to Brisbane that goes straight through Gatton. So it's those sort of things, just knowing what industry is coming, what will be there. You talk to people about Gatton, and I was like, oh, they're building a huge prison. And like, oh, that's, not a desirable location. But really, you're not releasing prisoners where they're interned. So they're going back to where they came from.
Several thousand the Queensland government jobs that won't be made redundant. If you do have an economic cycle up and down, mines shut, right? Ports shut, refineries might shut, but you will never really lose a government job. So that will kind of weather the economic cycles. There are going to be several hundred people that are going to relocate to the area. So that makes some sense.
Yeah, and as the Brisbane sprawl and Gold Coast sprawl gets wider and wider, having a major train station that's feeding Toowoomba to Brisbane, it runs straight through Gatton. That was the reason for that property. And then I look at Mackay. There's huge growth. Unfortunately, here in Queensland, the Kane farms are starting to die out. Like, we got Kane Farm on our doorstep here at Jack as well. That's getting ready for redevelopment. As those Kane farms die out and the land gets reacquired, you're going to see mass developments. And as the urban sprawl keeps going and people are moving out west or up north to get away from the high cost of living down here in southeast Queensland, those regional areas are going to start to boom even more.
So we've sold Southport, we've sold Gatton. We're keeping Jacobs Well because it's a long-term hold. I'm quite familiar with the Jacobs Well area and 100% see what you see, that the way that it's going to evolve over the years. Is Mackay going to be a long-term hold? Because you've clearly got, I guess you're not afraid to sell something to roll over into the next project, or whether it's a business acquisition or a property. But will you retain Mackay long term, you feel?
I think I'll retain it long term. The plan is to do the development approval on it next year and go a 5-story multi-door complex, 1 or 2 bedroom units. And then sit on that. So you've got 6 years to sit on a DA. You have to reapply. So probably do that and then look what the market's doing. And again, this goes back to like the regional real estate agents really don't know what they're looking at or talking at. You talk to them about development approvals and like, it doesn't add value, where you talk to the developer and if that's already got the approval in place, it's a no-brainer for them. Half their due diligence is done. The town planning's there to go act on it. It is adding hundreds of thousands of dollars of value to that property. So again, we'll initiate town planning at the start of next year, go get the development approval and get some architectural drawings done, and then decide. It depends on what the market's going to do, what the Reserve Bank does. If the Reserve Bank cuts interest rates, let's say March, April next year, then I think we'll be potentially looking to offload it mid-year and have that 12-month cycle on it.
Yeah, yep. Sweet. And so I believe you're sort of next looking for a 10-pack.
I am, yeah. So I want to get into the commercial lending side of things. So straight away with commercial, it's a 30% deposit. But yeah, I want more than the 3 to 4 doors on my next one. I'm looking for a 10-pack, 1 to 2 bedrooms or bigger if I can, and looking anywhere in Australia now for that.
Yeah, and just purely chasing like an older style complex as well that you might have the potential to develop in the future, or open to newer.
I'm open to new, but again, you've got a newer depreciation cycle on a newer property, but it's more so the older ones that they're not really an infill site, but you could turn them into an infill site, knock it down and rebuild, redevelop it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when are you looking to commence searching for that?
Already looking. December's discount month. If you're on the market now, you're hurting. So I'm already looking.
Yeah. Very good.
What strikes me as quite important throughout this entire conversation is the need to partner with people that truly understand this, because you do have that. And I'm sorry, I am anchored onto the Sydney market, but the numbers that we gave earlier are in such stark contrast to the returns and the capital growth that you're getting in major cities. A lot of people are perhaps anchored correctly or incorrectly into buying in those big markets. And I know a lot of defence personnel that I know still kind of follow what their family says or follow what their friends whisper in their ear. You've got to buy in the Sydney market now or you'll never get in, or you've got to buy in the Brisbane market now, you'll never get in. That might not necessarily be the correct approach depending on what stage you are in your life, depending on what stage you are in your investment cycle. it does strike me as important to partner with the experts. And I know, Kane, this is what we were talking about on our last podcast as well, where we unpacked the 10 top tips for defence professionals investing. You do need to work with your buyer's agents or your good sales agents that know a market inside and out to make sure that you're doing the right thing for your financial journey.
100%. And I think the key for the defence guys out there, they live their life 2 to 3 years at a time, depending on their core and their posting and their role. So there's so many layers of complexity there. Like there's obviously the property market. And if you're moving from Townsville to Sydney to Melbourne or whatnot, you got to analyse the two markets you're getting posted to and from. Then analyse your grants. There's obviously the civilian grants, but also the defence grants in there as well. And then on top is the overall strategy that you're employing. I think one of my favourite strategies as a default, everyone's 100% different, but go to a location, utilise HPAS, get DHOAS on a property, post away from it. So then you've got a accelerated cash flow on an asset or your first one into the market. So you've got your DHOAS loan going in and you've maximised HPAS, post away and then start building out a rent vesting portfolio. So you can obviously, again, accelerate the cash flow of your portfolio because not only you're rent vesting, which is typically a better way to build a portfolio because it's a higher lifestyle for a lower cost of living, but you're also getting paid rent assistance in whatever area that you're posted. So bit of a segue there, but yeah, that's one of my favourite sort of strategies as a bit of a default, I guess, with a blank canvas.
Can you get DHOAS and rental assistance at the same time?
No, not at the same time. But if you say you're posted to Sydney at the moment and you're going to Townsville and you got a clean slate, you can buy a property in Townsville. You get HPAS, which is like the first home owner's grant, 17K taxed. And then you can, if you've done your minimum service requirements, get DHOAS loan on that property. You'll live in it for that posting. But say you were to get posted away from that locality, you could then retain the DHOAS and the property and just put a tenant in there. And then say you get posted back to Sydney, you would just get rent assistance in Sydney. You know, and then that's where you would then continue to harvest the equity in property one for property two and just buy strategically where you're potentially not getting posted to. So then you can always maintain rent assistance through your career.
Was this something that was critical in your journey, Morgan?
Not really. I didn't understand this back then when I was in. I spent too much time away from home and didn't have access to people like Kane. So I think for, if I could go back and redo.
I mean, your journey might have been a bit more, even more expansive if you had it, right?
I definitely think if we weren't trying to start a business when I got out. So essentially back to that injury, I was posted to Kokoda Barracks here in Canungra, was my last posting before I left the defence. I was undergoing rehabilitation and learning to use my leg and walk properly. In that time, I went and did my mortgage broking course and my real estate course, and we purchased a house because we needed somewhere that I could get around, be in my own place, out of sight, out of mind, whilst I was studying and living in it and provide a life for my wife and my daughter. If I could go back and redo it, I think that money would have been better spent going into more or multiple rental properties and rent vesting like Kane was doing. It's definitely, I think it's a significant better way to do things. You can get bigger loans. Yes, you pay a little bit higher on interest, but it comes down to what its rental return is. If you've got a good real estate agent there or property manager, they can sort of tailor those rentals to best reflect yourself to go get the property you need. And again, it comes down to what your accountant's telling you too, like whether you need to negatively gear it positively or neutrally. Me personally, I like to positively gear all my properties, except for that Jack as well one.
And that is the benefit of partnering with people in the know. And of course, if you are moving around Australia, having a positively geared property because you picked or you took the time to pick one that's not necessarily going to be a financial burden over the long run, that just gives you the flexibility, right? It makes you sleep easier at night.
And I think there's one thing I do want to flag that Morgan's mentioned he was medically discharged, but not everyone gets medical discharge by any means, but many people leave defence with injuries. And if that is you, and you haven't gone through the DVA process, happy for you to reach out to me. I've got a lot of contacts in that space because I think it's critical to get them ticked off on your file to make sure that, one, you've got medical treatment for those injuries, but two, it can be another way to, a compensation for those injuries, which can form part of your portfolio.
Now, I want to unpack, Morgan, a little bit more on your end, because you've given us a bit of a glimpse into how you guide your investments. I want to see a little bit more, because looking at my own history, and everyone's got those misses where they're very glad they missed when they first start their journey, and you look back, thank God that never happened, right? And one thing for me was buying in. We tried to buy in a very big growth suburb in central Brisbane. That would have been quite a lot of money out of our back pocket. And sure, it would have been okay for capital gains, but it would have just tied us down too financially, and you would have been kind of capped at the one investment property, and your actual ability to regrow from that point would have just been a little bit too much of an anchor. You mentioned a lot of your properties are positively geared. You mentioned the 7% yield. Looking broadly, what is your philosophy when it comes to building out your portfolio that you can share with our listeners?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm really not looking for any one particular type. Like, I've had units, complexes, single houses, multi-door houses. It's just as long as it works, and don't be afraid to negotiate. I see a lot of people just walk into a property and they take face value of what the agent says. Hey, it's 900,000. Sweet, we'll sign at 9, 10, or whatever it is. Use good, reputable building and pest inspectors. They can save you a lot of money. Do your research on costings of things, i.e. paint, carpet. Don't just throw out random numbers. But if you know exactly what it's going to cost me, $8,000 to paint the internal of a house, you can start using those things. You seem more confident to the agent, and then the agent will just back down. Because again, most agents are there. They've what we got in the industry called commission breath. They just want to get that contract signed and get their paycheck at the end. They're not really caring too much, not invested that much. That's what I find more so in regional areas. So the ability to negotiate, if you go in there strong, confident, negotiate it down, get the price down. Like, for instance, in a car property, they originally had it listed at 910. We paid 860 for it. So we used a really good building and pest inspector, went through all 3 units. We set a list of what we have to do, what it's going to cost us, met the owners on somewhat reasonable and amicable terms, and said, well, this is what it's going to cost to get the bathroom redone, because they all need it. They all had water ingress. So we knocked the price down and using that to our best advantage.
So what advice would you give to people potentially now that are listening to this podcast that might still be in service, that think, okay, this is something that I want to do. These are steps that I want to take. What should their first step be?
I think linking up with someone like Kane is probably the best step to find out exactly what they can use defense to their best capability, either DHOAS and all those sort of things. Like, again, I didn't know about these when I was in defense. Defense pays young people pretty well. Like, there's a 23-year-old on a submarine. I was on 140 grand a year. Like, that's crazy money for a 23, 24-year-old. And if I could have had a more of a strategic plan to save a bit more of that instead of buying the jet ski or the ute and sort of pissing against the wall, linking up with someone like Kane and putting a strategy in place to buy property, I would have been significantly more along my journey than I am now.
This is the common thing that you get.
Yeah, but still a pretty good journey to be on where you are.
It is, but I think it was a lot maturing once I left and saw how the big real world works. I guess you're a little bit institutionalized in the defense. Once you get into the real world and really see what it's like and how to make proper money. It's just sort of watching other people. We were talking previously about Instagram and TikTok and X and Facebook, just finding those people that have done it, watch what their mistakes were, don't make the same mistake, and try and do it better.
Listen to the Defense Property Podcast. Do your research. Right. But I mean, Kane and Morgan, you both mentioned things that I think are, they're recurring themes that I hear a lot about when I'm podcasting with people, or when I'm researching on, and when I'm writing about property, and I'm doing it for myself. Number one, Morgan, that you mentioned there is kind of don't cut corners. Like, don't cut corners. Don't just get the cheapest building and pest inspection you can, because, that could, open up you for major financial liabilities down the long run if you buy a suboptimal place. But B, also, it mitigates that, what was it, commission breath you said? Commission breath?
Yeah, commission breath. Yeah. They really, all they care about, again, and we see this a lot, is they just want to get that contract signed and get it settled. Then they get paid, they move on to the next. There's no, they don't do their due diligence, they don't look into the property, they don't know their market properly. When you're buying properties off, like, you look on realestate.com, you look at the top 3 performers in that suburb, they're the ones that have the top tier properties, the best, they're probably your best negotiators in the area too. So, if you're buying from the subpar ones that don't really care or not there to negotiate, they sort of bend faster.
Yeah, I think 4 key top tips, I guess, would be firstly having a strategy, whether that's the market you're leaving or going to, you're buying, what grants you're strategizing with, just have an overall strategy and know what your path is. Research where you are. So know the intricate details of the market, the days on market, the trends of that market. So you know where you're buying and what you're buying. Due diligence. Morgan's mentioned it a few times, but I think I've mentioned on the podcast in the past, we brought a property 15 years later, it flooded, because we did no due diligence. I was 22 years old, just, thought I was doing the right thing. But in hindsight, our current due diligence checklist that we do now would have prevented us from buying that one and going through that. And then finally, it's probably your execution. What are you using to know its value? Don't negotiate blindly. How are you negotiating on building a past the execution of the purchase all the way through to settlement?
So what kind of due diligence aspects do you look at? I mean, in Brisbane, I can imagine
clearly flood now.
Yeah.
After, I think, it was the Australia Day floods in 2019 up in Townsville where our tenant got evacuated by a tinny. So clearly floods at the top of our list, bushfire as well. And then you can go check housing commission status in the areas. So they're the sort of the high level non-negotiable. And then you're going into your nitty gritty. Power lines, main roads, roundabouts, not backing onto commercial properties, floor plan, and it's not something funky that's not going to appeal to the masses and block shape and size. All these, because they're all things like, and I'm sure Morgan will know, like say on the Gold Coast in 2020, 21, 22, everything was selling super quick. Days on market sitting sub 20, but what we find, fast forward 15, 20, 30 years, and you might be transitioning to retirement. You might have a medical emergency in the family. And days on market you've paid, 50,000 too much for that because you're getting frustrated with the market and you've brought the ugly duckling on the main road with a power line hanging over it. But hey, you're in the market. Fast forward those 30 years, the days on market might have trended out to 90, and it's a dead, flat, cold market. The good ones are taking 90 days to sell. If you've got the ugly duckling on the main road with a power line hanging over it, the only way that it's going to sit on the market for 300 days and the only way that you'll be able to sell it is by heavily discounting the price. And if you're transitioning to retirement or medical emergency, whatever reason you've decided to sell that investment, if you're going to have to heavily discount it to sell it, and that's the last thing you want to do in that life event. So the due diligence is critical to get right up front. It's because it's your insurance policy through the 30 years or however long that you hold that asset. So I feel it's one of the most commonly overlooked. People look at the aesthetics of the property and they fall in love with the kitchen or they see themselves living there, but it's an investment. And it protects you through your holding period, or at least it removes a lot of errors in the future and events.
You do find like a lot of buyers get that like panic that when they find a place that they really like, they'll, I really have to get it now. I have to get it now. And then they're like bidding against themselves, I guess, that adage. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, it does happen a lot.
And you've got to kind of calm them down, just like there will be more coming through. Just relax. Don't bid against yourself. It does seem like, and I'm very enthusiastic, Kane, now that you and I are doing this podcast together, because it's going across our Smart Property Investment Network at Momentum Media, which is a platform for property investors and property professionals, and also Defence Connect, which is our platform, our Defence Podcast Network, which is a platform for people in defence and defence industry. And this podcast is getting a lot of interest from the defence industry at the moment. We're seeing quite a few new listeners coming through trying to negotiate this. And just from what you were saying to me before, it seems like it's not too late. And a lot of people in the Australian property market can feel, and I just anecdotally hear this all the time, where so many people are like, oh, it's too late. How do I even begin my property investment journey? I wouldn't know where to start. Oh, the cat's kind of bolted, or the horse bolted. It's too late. I won't be able to catch up with it. It's done. But even if you're a young Australian in service and you've got your first home buyer's grant, say you've done your 4 years ROSO or whatever it might be, because I know some cores have it differently, but you've done that, you've done your minimum service, and then you've got your DHOAS options there. it really has, the horse hasn't bolted with this.
No, certainly not. And sometimes using the grants isn't the right move. Like if you are posted to Sydney, I would just argue that potentially rent investing and just, you don't have to use DHOAS straight away or HPAS. You can maybe strategize to use that on your exit from defence. You might choose that you're only going to do 6 years, 10 years, 20, whatever. But there's a very good argument to be made to leave your entitlements on the own occupier side to the end of the journey and maximise rent vesting from day one. You do have to save because you generally don't have grants for investment side of things. But it comes back to, I feel like I've harped on, but that strategy piece, like getting that right for your own, tailored situation.
I don't think you can harp on about it enough, because I think between the three of us, everyone's seen plenty of stories of people that have acquired properties willy-nilly, and it's only created the long-term headaches for themselves.
Yeah. And we've got a client at the moment, we're about to buy, not all at once, but 3 properties for him, probably over the span of 12 months. He's in his mid-40s, just posted from Perth to Sydney. And so he'll go down that rent vest, he'll use defence accommodation, and then just start planting his flags in good markets.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, Morgan, what's next on your professional and investment horizon?
Professional, to double our numbers for sales next year. So I'd like Kane said, well, I think you said yourself, like I did 103 settled properties so far this year. We've got another 15 to settle before next Friday. So I want to double that for myself. We're about to move into our new office 1st of Feb. So we've got, currently in our office, we've got 12 people. The new office is going to have seating for 24. So definitely dominate the Northern Gold Coast a bit more. But then on the investment side is just to acquire as many properties as I can next year. So we're gearing up for that now. We're just waiting. Again, the Reserve Bank's going to be a massive one, which way they go, whether they hold or drop or increase. But again, I just wanted to touch on one last thing you're doing, talking about due diligence. I think one of the best people you can link yourself up with is a town planner as well. For myself, talking to town planners in different regional areas, you just ask a simple question: where are you writing most your town planning advice for, or where are you looking at for your clients? They'll let you know pretty fast where the growth area is going to be. And if they're already looking there, those growth areas are going to come up pretty fast.
Yeah, great tip.
And are these town planners council? Like they're...
No. Steer clear of these private town planners. They're the ones that take the client, like the developer, through DA with the council. Yeah. And you just ask them, like, where are you writing most of your DAs for at the moment? And they sort of have the ins on, where the next, I don't know, Logan Reserve or Yarra was going to be, or Redbank Plains or Ipswich or whatever. They'll let you know where they're doing it and start looking at that area. Because if it's going to start booming, you buying in that area, you buy yourself a renovator, someone gets a bit butthurt, they miss out on land, they're still looking in that area, they're going to pay top dollar for that renovator that you purchased and renovated yourself.
No, it's fantastic advice. Kane, our last podcast for the year.
Last one for the year, yeah.
What's on your horizon for early 25?
Early 25. I think we were just talking outside the Avalon air shows early next year, so I think we're going to make an appearance down there.
Nice.
I think we're booked in to go for lunch after this. We wrap this potty up and chew through that a little bit more. That's actually, that will be exciting. And then just keep going, yeah.
So you'll be down at Avalon with us.
Yeah, that's the plan, I think.
God, it shows how much I read my emails, so I apologise. Well, that's good. Okay, so I'm gonna volunteer you, for any of our defence professionals that are listening to this podcast, and we'll be at Avalon, which I know is going to be a lot of you. There's a couple hundred of you. So reach out to Kane. Reach out to Kane Dury. If you have any questions, he'll be down there. So, I mean, you might be at work, but you'll be able to sneak away from your chalet or your little booth for 30 minutes.
Well, I'm not sure if we're going to have a booth yet. We'll definitely be there. So we'll either be there talking and just amongst the exhibitor days.
Yeah.
Or, the booth is.
But our exhibitors will be able to sneak away from their booths to grab a quick coffee with you and ask you all the questions.
Perfect.
How they can leverage your expertise and build their property portfolios of their own.
100%.
So I'm going to volunteer for that. Best way of contacting you, LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or just jump on the website, discoverbuyersagency.com.au, or reach out to me directly, Kane at discoverbuyersagency.com.au.
Yeah, perfect. And I know I always feel a lot smarter after talking to you because I genuinely learn so much.
Yeah.
I learn so much. It's I think every time it's like there's a new tip that you give me, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm like, I shouldn't swear, but I'll write it down. It's every time that we talk, I'm furiously make notes. Like, didn't think about that. No, didn't think about that one either. So thank you so much for all of your insights, because I know you're helping me on my journey as well.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks, Morgan, for joining us. I appreciate your time. You sound like a very busy man. So lots of very helpful tips. The Navy crew out there would have loved this one as well.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. It was, I think that the biggest thing is just to not piss it up against the wall, save the money, and get into property as fast as possible.
Fantastic. Well, I think that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us from the GC, Morgan.
Thank you. Pleasure being here. Thank you.
That was Morgan Oliver, Director and Sales Agent of JMO Property Group. And of course, thank you to my amazing co-host, Kane Dury.
And no, thank you, Liam.
First time in the studio together, and now it's time to pop off in beautiful North Sydney for lunch.
Excellent. Sounds great.
That was my co-host, Kane Dury, Director and Lead Buyers Agent at Discover Buyers Agency. And we will be back in 2025 with another episode of the Defence Property Podcast. But if you're at Avalon, which I know many, many, many of you are, speak to Kane, because he is one of the industry leaders with his insights into property investing. And I'm sure I'm going to volunteer him. He will have 10 minutes for a coffee with you to help you on your journey. So please reach out, because tap into the knowledge of our experts. That's how you will grow your portfolio. And that is all we have time for today. And we'll be back with another podcast shortly. But until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.